They tell you that talking to yourself is a sign of instability, that inner conversations belong to those who've lost their grip on reality. But what if the opposite is true? What if this inner dialogue is not a symptom of madness, but the soul's way of keeping you sane in a world that constantly pulls you away from your essence? The truth is that every human being holds within them a private theater where countless voices speak. Thoughts, doubts, intuitions, forgotten memories, and quiet truths. The question is not whether you hear them, but whether you have the courage to listen. Most people fear the sound of their own mind because it reveals what they try hardest to conceal. The inner dialogue is the whisper of the unseen self. The deeper intelligence that observes your life from within the silence of your being. It speaks in subtle tones through sudden insight, spontaneous emotion, or that small voice that says, something isn't right here. The world calls it overthinking, but it's not overthinking, it's inner communication. The psyche is not a single entity, but a constellation of parts, and when these parts begin to converse, healing begins. The voice you answer in solitude is not imaginary, it is the unlived life trying to reach you. Consider how you talk to yourself when you fail, when you are afraid, or when no one is watching. The tone of that voice reveals the state of your relationship with yourself. If the voice is cruel, it means you have internalized the world's hostility. If it is kind, it means you have begun to reclaim your soul. To talk to yourself consciously is to step into self, parenting, to become both the guide and the student of your own evolution. You begin to see that the voice within is not foreign. It's the part of you that never left home, the witness that has washed every joy and every wound with the same calm presence. There are moments when the inner dialogue feels like a storm. Arguments between reason and desire, between fear and intuition. You might think you're breaking apart, but in truth, you're being rearranged. Each conversation within you is an attempt to reconcile opposites, to bring harmony between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. The unseen self does not use language to confuse, it uses it to awaken. When it repeats painful truths, it's not tormenting you, it's inviting you to stop lying to yourself. When it brings up past memories, it's not punishing you, it's asking you to integrate what was left unresolved. This is not madness, it is metamorphosis. The greatest danger lies not in hearing inner voices, but in denying them. Suppressed thoughts turn into projections, unacknowledged emotions harden into resentment, and the unspoken self begins to rebel in silence. The person who never listens inwardly becomes controlled by forces they don't understand. Yet the one who dares to listen starts to see patterns, meanings, and messages woven through their own consciousness. To engage with the unseen self is to enter a sacred dialogue, a meeting point between the known and the mysterious. It is here that intuition speaks louder than logic, and where dreams reveal what the day cannot. When you talk to yourself, you are not escaping reality, you are exploring it more deeply. The external world gives you data, but the internal one gives you wisdom. You are both the listener and the speaker, the question and the answer. This dialogue is how the soul remembers itself after years of pretending to be only human. Every word you whisper inwardly, every thought you confront honestly, is an act of remembrance. You are not conversing with insanity, you are conversing with eternity hidden within your own being. Inside every human being exists not one voice, but many. We are not a single, unified self as we like to believe, but a collection of selves, each one born from an experience, a trauma, a hope, or a dream that once demanded expression. These inner voices are not illusions, they are fragments of a greater consciousness that splintered as life unfolded. Some speak with authority, others whisper in fear, and a few remain buried in silence. The mind often mistakes this inner multiplicity for confusion, but it is not confusion. It is the language of the forgotten, whole trying to remember itself. As children, we came into the world whole. Our emotions flowed freely. We spoke truth without fear. But to survive in families, schools, and societies that demanded obedience, we learned to split. We silenced certain emotions, disowned certain desires, and built masks to fit the expectations around us. The child who wanted to cry learned to stay quiet. The dreamer learned to conform. The angry one learned to smile. Each suppression created an inner fragment, a voice that once had life, now hidden beneath layers of adaptation. These voices never die, they wait. They wait for the moment when the conscious self becomes mature enough to listen again. When you hear conflicting thoughts inside your mind, one urging courage, another whispering doubt, you are witnessing the meeting of these inner fragments. One part carries the wisdom of your past pain, another holds the innocence of your lost potential. To reject one in favor of the other is to continue the division. To listen to both is to begin the integration. Every inner voice, no matter how contradictory, contains a piece of your original wholeness. The critic that scolds you is a protector that learned harshness to keep you safe. The fearful voice is not weakness. It's an ancient guardian reminding you of old wounds. The silent part that says nothing may hold the deepest wisdom of all. The forgotten whole can never be reclaimed through denial. It can only be approached through dialogue. When you sit in silence and allow your thoughts to speak, not to judge them, but to hear them, you invite your inner fragments back home. You begin to recognize that these voices are not enemies competing for control. They are parts of a single consciousness longing to cooperate. True self-awareness is not the eradication of inner conflict, but the orchestration of inner harmony. Like instruments in a symphony, each voice contributes a tone, and when you learn to listen to them with compassion, the dissonance begins to resolve. There is a reason why people often feel torn between different selves. The achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the spiritual seeker. Each represents a chapter of your evolution that never fully closed. The achiever may carry the wounds of neglect, striving for validation. The caretaker may hold the remnants of guilt, trying to earn love through sacrifice. The rebel may protect the child who was once powerless. The spiritual seeker may be the voice of the soul, trying to guide them all back toward unity. The goal is not to destroy these identities, but to recognize them as facets of the same jewel. To speak with them is to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. The voices within are mirrors of memory, echoes of emotions that were never fully lived. They are not here to confuse you, but to remind you that your wholeness was never lost, only divided. When you acknowledge each voice, when you give it space to express, something profound happens. The inner noise transforms into inner music. The fragments begin to recognize one another, and through that recognition, they start to merge. Wholeness is not a return to simplicity, it is the embrace of complexity. Every inner voice is a survivor of your own becoming, a sacred piece of the forgotten whole calling you to remember what it feels like to be complete. There comes a moment when the outer world grows still, when the constant hum of distraction fades, and all that remains is the quiet. At first, the silence feels foreign, almost unbearable. We have grown addicted to noise, to the endless chatter, the digital pulse, the rhythm of other people's thoughts, filling the space where our own used to live. But when the noise stops, something ancient begins to stir. Beneath the stillness, a hidden voice rises, the one you have ignored for years. Silence outside does not mean emptiness. It means that the deeper conversation, long suppressed, is finally beginning to speak. Human beings fear silence because silence has no mask. It strips away the false confidence that noise provides. In silence, you cannot hide behind activity, opinion, or performance. You meet yourself as you are, unfiltered, raw, and vulnerable. The outer stillness acts as a mirror, reflecting the truth of the inner landscape. This is why people who isolate themselves for too long often discover that their minds become louder. It is not madness, it is revelation. The soul deprived of attention begins to express everything that has been left unsaid. Every forgotten emotion, every repressed truth, every unhealed wound finds a voice in the quiet. The conversation that emerges within silence is not always gentle. It can be fierce, chaotic, even frightening. Old memories resurface, regrets echo. Desires long buried rise from the shadows, demanding acknowledgement. Many flee from this inner dialogue by running back to the noise, music, work, conversation, anything to drown out the sound of their own consciousness. Yet this flight only deepens the distance from themselves. The truth is that the silence outside is never empty. It is full of what you have avoided. To stay with it, to listen without interruption, is to step into the sacred act of self-encounter. There is a reason why all great revelations are born in quiet places. Deserts, forests, monasteries, the solitude of night. The mind, when freed from external noise, begins to tune itself to a higher frequency of awareness. Thoughts slow down, emotions find their roots, and intuition begins to speak in clear language. The quiet becomes a medium through which the unseen communicates. What once felt like loneliness begins to transform into communion. You realize that the voice you hear in stillness is not a stranger. It is the deeper self that has been waiting patiently beneath the noise of your daily existence. The conversation within silence teaches humility. It reveals how much of your life is spent avoiding yourself. You begin to notice how you talk to fill the void, how you scroll to avoid thinking, how you chase stimulation to escape reflection. But silence, with its unwavering patience, strips all of that away. It shows you the true state of your soul, its hunger, its exhaustion, its forgotten longings. And in that awareness, something remarkable happens. The heart begins to speak. It speaks not in words, but in sensations, in waves of intuition, in feelings that have no name, but are undeniably real. You start to realize that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of meaning. As you dwell longer in this quiet, the inner conversation deepens. What began as discomfort turns into understanding. You start asking questions that were buried under years of noise. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I actually believe? What am I avoiding? These are not intellectual questions. They are invitations. In the stillness, you are not speaking to yourself alone. You are speaking with the timeless part of you that has witnessed every moment of your existence. the dialogue becomes sacred, the silence becomes alive, and what once felt like isolation begins to feel like home. Within every human being exists a landscape, both visible and hidden, a realm of thought that we navigate daily, and a realm of the unconscious that operates beneath the surface of awareness. The inner dialogue, the conversations you have with yourself, the questions, the reflections, the doubts, and the insights, is not merely idle chatter. It is the sacred bridge connecting the conscious self with the vast, mysterious world of the unconscious. Without it, the psyche remains fragmented, and the soul's messages remain locked in shadow. The conscious mind is the part of us that lives in the present, that acts, decides, and interprets reality. It is aware of time, of rules, of what is considered normal. The unconscious, however, is timeless, vast, and often illogical. It stores memories, instincts, desires, and truths that cannot be reached through reason alone. The inner dialogue is the means by which these two realms meet. It is through self-reflection, questioning, and attentive listening that the unconscious begins to speak in a language the conscious mind can understand. Every thought you interrogate, every feeling you acknowledge, is a step across the bridge. Often, the inner dialogue appears as conflict. One part of the mind urges action, another cautions restraint. One part desires freedom, another clings to security. This tension is not a flaw, but a signal that the conscious and unconscious are negotiating. The inner voices are fragments of deeper truth struggling to emerge into awareness. If ignored, the unconscious continues to operate in the shadows, influencing behavior in ways that seem inexplicable. Dreams, sudden intuitions, and inexplicable emotions are often the unconscious attempting to reach the conscious mind. By engaging in dialogue with oneself, by listening and reflecting, these messages become accessible. The inner conversation is the interpreter of the invisible, giving shape and meaning to the otherwise ineffable. The bridge of inner dialogue is also a path of integration. The unconscious is not a separate enemy to be conquered, but a hidden ally to be known. Each question you pose to yourself, each honest answer you seek, allows suppressed or neglected aspects of your psyche to surface. You begin to recognize patterns of thought and behavior that were previously unconscious, bringing them into the light of understanding. This is why journaling, meditation, and conscious self-reflection are so powerful. They amplify the dialogue, strengthening the bridge and allowing deeper currents of the psyche to flow freely. Fear often keeps people from crossing this bridge. The unconscious contains truths that are uncomfortable, memories that are painful, desires that are socially unacceptable. Yet the inner dialogue is a safe conduit. It allows you to explore these hidden realms gradually, translating their messages into conscious terms you can comprehend. The process requires courage, honesty, and patience. It is not about erasing a conflict, but about listening to the voices within with openness, even when they challenge your self-image or confront your fears. Through this conversation, the conscious mind begins to see itself reflected in the unconscious, and the unconscious begins to feel recognized, understood, and integrated. Every moment of self-reflection, every inner question is a step toward wholeness. The inner dialogue is not a passive activity, it is a dynamic encounter where the known meets the unknown. It allows the conscious self to learn from the unconscious, and for the unconscious to shape the conscious in subtle, transformative ways. Creativity, intuition, and insight often emerge precisely because this bridge has been crossed, because dialogue has been established between the layers of the mind that otherwise remain separate. Through this bridge, the psyche moves toward balance, toward understanding, and toward the reconciliation of what has long been divided within. The inner dialogue is not a luxury or a trivial habit. It is the essential link between what is seen and what is hidden, between what is lived and what is waiting to be discovered. To engage in it is to step into the depth of one's own being, to allow the shadow to speak, and to permit the light of consciousness to respond. It is through this sacred exchange that the self begins to know itself fully, to awaken to its hidden depths, and to create coherence from complexity. Each reflection, each inward question, each honest acknowledgement becomes a rung on the bridge connecting the conscious awareness of the present with the infinite wisdom of the unconscious. Most people assume that sanity is measured by conformity, by the ability to function without noticing the tumult of the mind. They imagine that peace comes from suppressing the inner world, ignoring impulses, and obeying the rules of society without question. But true sanity is not found in silence, in the absence of thought or emotion. It is found in the relationship one cultivates with the inner world, with the thoughts, emotions, desires, fears, and fragments of the self that exist beneath the surface. To ignore this inner realm is not wisdom. It is a subtle form of imprisonment, a denial of one's own psyche. The inner world is not a single, unified entity. It is a complex ecosystem of voices and memories, of longings and regrets, of curiosity and instinct. Some of these voices are welcoming, offering guidance and insight. Others are critical, defensive, or fearful. To navigate this landscape successfully requires attention, patience, and courage. It requires one to listen without judgment, to allow the shadow aspects of the self to speak without fear. Silence in the outer world is meaningless if it is accompanied by neglect of this inner conversation. True sanity is relational. It is about creating a dialogue with what lives inside, no matter how fragmented or uncomfortable it may appear. When one neglects this inner relationship, the consequences are subtle but profound. Repressed emotions, ignored desires, and denied truths accumulate beneath the surface. They manifest as anxiety, irritability, indecision, and a sense of emptiness that cannot be filled by external accomplishments or distractions. The mind, in its desire to maintain coherence, projects these unacknowledged elements onto the world, creating conflict in relationships, self-sabotage, and a sense of alienation. Those who fear their own thoughts often fear life itself, because life becomes a mirror of the neglected inner world. Conversely, those who engage in dialogue with their inner selves find clarity, resilience, and creativity. They develop an intimate knowledge of their own depths, which allows them to act with awareness rather than impulse. The relationship with the inner world is not static. It is dynamic, evolving as the self evolves. One must learn to recognize the subtle movements of thought and feeling, the hidden patterns that govern behavior, and the impulses that arise from unconscious motivations. Meditation, journaling, reflection, and creative expression are tools that help maintain this relationship. They allow the inner voices to speak not as threats or distractions, but as messengers carrying important truths. Listening to these messages requires courage, because the inner world often contains aspects that society has conditioned us to fear: anger, vulnerability, desire, and despair. Yet to deny them is to deny life itself, for the psyche thrives on acknowledgement and engagement. Furthermore, the inner relationship allows for reconciliation of conflict. The conscious self often rejects impulses and feelings that appear irrational, while the unconscious holds them in secret. By engaging with these elements openly, one begins to integrate the shadow into conscious life, transforming what was once disowned into a source of insight and strength. This is the essence of psychological maturity, the ability to converse with the entire self, to hold space for contradiction, and to allow inner multiplicity to exist without fear. In doing so, the individual cultivates a resilience that no external circumstance can shake, because sanity is anchored not in control or avoidance, but in honest engagement with one's own psyche. Those who understand this principle recognize that silence alone does not bring peace. A quiet mind without relationship is a dormant mind, like a garden untended, where weeds of repression grow unchecked. Sanity emerges not from the absence of thought, but from a conscious, compassionate, and disciplined engagement with the self. It is in this ongoing dialogue, in the willingness to hear, respond, and integrate the voices within, that a true sense of stability, clarity, and vitality arises. The inner world becomes not a source of fear or confusion, but a partner in life, guiding the conscious self, revealing hidden truths, and allowing the individual to navigate existence with awareness, authenticity, and depth